All right, guys, today we're here to talk about Frost Death Knight, and I am so excited to be making this video because if you have not heard the news, Frost got a massive rework.
Then I'll run up, get Liam's signature, and this will be on the books and your wedding. Why, Maureen, you've enhanced yourself.
Yeah, I got my tooth fixed.
I'm talking about your tits, your big, giant new titties, Maureen.
So, I wasn't going to make a guide quite yet, but I know you guys are excited to try out the new stuff, and I know people are wondering, what talents am I going to run? Maybe you're new to Death Knight, and you're like, how do I even play this spec? So, I've got you covered here today. I'm going to put out a guide early. If anything changes, I will update it or leave a pinned comment. So, we've got a lot to cover. Let's go ahead and get started. Alright guys, and we're going to kick things off with talents. Now, when you log in, you may notice on the Death Knight tree you have an extra point. That is because Abomination's limb has been removed. Rest in peace, slappy hands. The good news, however, is that you may notice Cleaving Strikes has been changed. So now, Death and Decay, you can completely remove it from your bars. You're not going to need to use it as Frost at all. You can go ahead and just leave it to rot in your spellbook. Now your cleave is going to be done with Frost Scythe instead of Obliterate. And I'll talk a little bit more on that in the rotation section, but just a bit of a heads up on changes in the class tree. Now for the Frost tree, I'm not going to cover every single talent. I just want to talk about some of the new ones. And if you're totally new to Frost Death Knight and you just want to know the best talents to run, this build right here is going to serve you well in both Raid with Cleave targets and Mythic Plus. You can optimize this a little bit, so if you're trying to do completely single target, you can run something like this. And for Mythic Plus, there's a bit of a change that you can make as well. You can drop some of these talents like this. Okay, get a little bit more AoE damage, but again, this build is going to serve you pretty well as an all-rounder. Now, as far as the new talents and changes that we have, we are obviously using Frost Scythe now, so we're not using Obliterate and Cleave anymore. So we're going to take this talent whenever there's more than one ad in the fight. So if you have, if it's not a single target boss fight, you want to run this ability. Empower Rune Weapon has been changed. So Empower Rune Weapon now has 2 charges, and it grants you a Killing Machine proc on use. So whenever you use this ability, you get a Killing Machine proc right away. And again, if you're new to Frost, we're going to talk about exactly what that is in the rotation section. But very, very good ability. You can probably keybind this wherever you had Death and Decay before. You're going to press it quite a bit. There's some cooldown reduction with Rhyme. So all in all, a pretty cool button. Now, some of the other things that have changed, we have Frozen Dominion. Frozen Dominion makes it so that whenever you press Pillar of Frost, you are going to automatically send out a Remorseless Winter around yourself. That Remorseless Winter is going to last longer, which, fellas, let's be honest, we could use that sometimes. And it is going to grant you Mastery. Now, the cool thing about this is that whenever Remorseless Winter is active, your Cleave ability, Frost Scythe, is going to deal extra damage. So this guarantees that whenever you are using your Pillar of Frost, your big damaging cooldown, you're going to have extra damage for your Cleave. So it works out really well. Great talent. You pretty much run this always right now. Very, very cool. We have Frost Reaper, another new talent. Frost Reaper is essentially, you can just think about it like it's a single target buff. I know it sounds like it does some AoE because it tethers enemies around you, but it tethers the enemy that you're hitting as well. So it ends up being a single target buff. Some of the other things I'll talk about. Frostbane. So if you remember last season, if you played Frost last season at all, you used to have to tab target and Frost Strike on different targets to shatter, to get this effect, Shattering Blade, which shatters 5 stacks of Razor Ice on the targets. Now you get these procs, which make it so that you can AoE shatter, so you can shatter the entire pack of mobs at once. It's really cool. Right now, it is not tuned as competitively as Breath of Sindragosa, so we're just not running it. If you really don't like Breath and you want to run it in Mythic Plus, you absolutely can, but just know that it is not as good, especially in single target. So the other change that we have is Breath of Sindragosa, and guys, I used to hate this talent. I was not a Breath enjoyer, so if you are coming back to Frost and you're like, I really didn't like that talent before, I'm telling you, it has changed. It no longer drains your runic power, and you can pretty much keep it active just by doing your normal rotation. So as long as you're doing your normal rotation correctly, Breath of Sindragosa will be active for about 20 to 25 seconds. It does a lot of damage in single target. It does a lot of damage in AoE. It is just a good button. Now let's talk about hero talents. So for hero talents, we have Deathbringer and Rider of the Apocalypse. Deathbringer is really cool. You apply this Reaper's Mark to your target. Dealing frost or shadow damage stacks up the mark. It gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and then it blows up. It's really cool. The problem with Deathbringer right now is it is undertuned compared to Rider of the Apocalypse. You can still run it in Mythic Plus if you want to, if you're not, going for crazy, you don't want to be the #1 damaging Frost Death Knight or whatever, you can still run it just fine. However, once we get tier set, the gap between these two is going to get a little bit bigger. If tuning happens or anything changes, don't worry, I'll leave an update, check for a pinned comment. Rider of the Apocalypse is essentially passive, and I know people are going to get on me for this because you can min-max it a lot, you can create all these different macros for it to make it min-max, but look, don't worry about it unless you're trying to, get a 99-100 parse. The tree is essentially passive. How it's going to work is your abilities have a chance to summon a different rider. So you have these little minions, guardians that spawn, and they deal damage. You also get a nice little horse charge, which is cool. The only caveat with Rider of the Apocalypse is that with Rider of the Apocalypse, you are always going to take Frostworm's Fury, because Frostworm's Fury summons all of the riders at once. So you want to make sure that you are using this ability when you want to do a lot of damage. Alright, and let's go ahead and talk about rotation. For the Frost Death Knight core rotation, Frost is about balancing its two resources. So first you have runes, which are these little circles down here, and then you have runic power, which is this bar that will fill up below your health bar. Spending runes on abilities will generate runic power. Spending runic power has a chance to refresh a rune. So there's a bit of synergy, a back and forth balance. Some abilities will cost runes, some will cost runic power. Now for your core rotation and single target, you have a couple abilities. So Howling Blast is a ranged attack. It applies a damage over time to the target, but it doesn't do a lot of damage. So this ability you really only press when you have a proc. When you have a proc, it makes it do a lot more damage. It is worth pressing. So keep that in mind when you're keybinding. You get procs for this pretty often, but you're only ever going to press it when you have a proc. Now, Obliterate is going to be the next attack that we have, and it is an overhead strike, costs 2 runes. It's pretty cool. And you're going to see we get these procs for it. So as you can see, we've built up 1 charge, 2 charge of these procs. And how that works is your auto attack critical strikes will give you procs for Obliterate and your Frost Scythe. Now, Obliterate procs make it so that it deals frost damage and it always critically strikes. Now, why this is important is because your mastery increases your frost damage. So these procs deal a ton of damage, okay? They deal a ton of damage, and if you weren't aware, magic damage goes through armor, so being frost does even more as well for that reason. But whenever you get these procs, it is going to be your #1 priority, okay? Your #1 priority. So when we send out this proc, it shoots out this cool glacial advance. When you get these procs, you want to send them as soon as you have them. You can see you can get up to 2 and you can spend them both at once, but you don't want to wait for 2. You kind of just want to send them as you have them so that you never overcap. So that's what that looks like. Now, finally, in the single target, we have Frost Strike, which is this runic power button. So Frost Strike, again, you want to spend your runic power to make sure that you give yourself runes back. And your priority is going to look something like, whenever you have an Obliterate proc, you're going to press that. If you don't have an Obliterate proc, but you have a Howling Blast proc, you're going to press that. If you don't have any procs, you're going to press Frost Strike. So that is sort of what that is going to look like. So right now I have no procs, so I press Frost Strike. I have a Killing Machine proc, Obliterate proc, so I press that. Nothing, so I press Frost Strike. Okay, I have a Rhyme proc, Howling Blast proc, so I press that. So it's really reactionary. It's really based around the procs that you're getting. And you may remember from the talent section I spoke about this Empower Rune Weapon. So Empower Rune Weapon is an ability which is going to do a little bit of damage. It's going to generate runic power, and it's going to give you one of those Obliterate procs on demand. So this is a really good button to press. You're going to want to keybind this somewhere that you're going to use often. Whenever you don't have, look, I can't press Frost Strike, I can't press Howling Blast because I don't have the proc for it. Obliterate, I don't have a proc for it. So what am I going to do? I'm going to use Empower Rune Weapon. That's going to give me the proc right away. See? So that's sort of what the single target rotation looks like. As far as the AoE, so if you have more than one target you're trying to attack, it's going to change a little bit. So the only real things that are going to change are, instead of Obliterate, you are going to press Frost Scythe, which does this sort of sweeping motion. See how I hit a couple targets in front of me? And instead of Frost Strike, you are going to use Glacial Advance, which shoots out this sort of ice, little ice line, I guess. So that is how it's going to change in AoE. Besides that, everything is going to stay the same as far as priority. So instead of hitting Obliterate when you get a proc, you're going to hit Frost Scythe when you get a proc. Now, as far as cooldowns go, we're going to talk about the major cooldowns that you have and sort of how you're going to use them. So the first is Pillar of Frost. This is Frost's bread and butter. This is your biggest cooldown that you use. It's really awesome. It makes you do a ton of damage, and it also makes it so that whenever you are pressing Howling Blast or Frost Strike, you are always guaranteed to get a proc of Obliterate. So this is really nice. I'm going to show you exactly what that looks like real quick. So when I press it, press Howling Blast, it gives me an Obliterate proc. I press it again, it gives me an Obliterate proc. I press Frost Strike, it gives me an Obliterate proc. So you're just sending out these procs again and again and again. It makes a really cool gameplay loop. You're doing a ton of damage with these overhead strikes. It looks awesome. And the other things that you're going to want to do are, you have these two abilities on a 1.5 minute cooldown, which aligns with Pillar of Frost because it's a 45-second cooldown. So what you're going to do whenever you are sending out Pillar of Frost, right before it, is you're going to send out Frostworm's Fury. This is going to summon an Ice Dragon, it summons all your riders, and they start doing a ton of damage. You also want to make sure that you have enough runic power before you start doing all your damage to use Breath of Sindragosa. And so Breath of Sindragosa, what it does is, once you have 60 runic power, you go ahead and press it, and it starts shooting out this cone of ice in front of you. It does a ton of AoE damage, it does a ton of single target damage, and you keep it active by just pressing your Howling Blast procs and your Obliterate procs. So your Empower Rune Weapon, you don't really need to save them for Pillar of Frost, but you need to make sure that you have some available for Breath of Sindragosa to make sure you keep that going. Breath should last about 20 to 25 seconds if you're doing everything right. But again, doing everything right is just sort of playing around your procs. So it's a lot easier than it used to be because it doesn't drain your runic power anymore. You're safe to press Frost Strike or Glacial Advance during it. That is what your major offensive cooldowns look like. Now, for a defensive perspective, You have Anti-Magic Shell. This is an amazing button. You should be pressing this in pretty much every single pull on Mythic Plus. It's a 40-second cooldown, so you may as well just use it. What it does is it gives you a little absorb shield for magic, and it prevents harmful magic effects from being applied. So that's things like fearing you, that's things like applying a damage over time to you. It's really good to use offensively when you're walking into a pack of mobs because they can't fear you, they can't, do anything to you. And it blocks some damage, so your healer will be happy. Your other defensives are going to be Icebound Fortitude, which breaks you out of stuns and gives you a wall to damage, so it's pretty nice to use. Lichborn, which makes you immune to charm, fear, and sleep, as well as gives you some leech, so doing extra damage will heal you. And then finally you have Anti-Magic Zone, which is this big zone that you can put down, and hopefully your team, they won't do this, but hopefully they run into it and it will block some magic damage for them. So that is what your core rotation and your cooldown usage should look like. Alright guys, now we're going to talk a little bit about stats and gearing. So for Frost, Critical Strike is very good. The reason Critical Strike is very good is it increases the chance that your abilities critically strike. Now, for Frost, whenever your auto attacks critically strike, it gives you those awesome Obliterate procs. So the higher this value is, the more of those procs you're getting, which is really awesome. The only problem with Critical Strike is that those procs make it so that your Obliterates always critically strike. It doesn't actually increase the damage. So how do we increase the damage? How do we do that? Mastery. So Mastery increases your Frost damage. Most of your abilities are Frost, so this just flat out increases the damage. Critical Strike gives you more procs of Obliterate. Mastery increases the damage of those procs. So they work really well together. You want a good mix of Critical Strike, and you want a good mix of Mastery. Haste, by no means is a bad stat. It's just a little less valuable than those other ones in the Frost toolkit. So it increases your attack speed, which is good because more auto attacks means more auto attack critical strikes. So there's still some value there, but it's not necessarily the best. So you still want some, just not as much. Now, I will say for Frost, Rider the Apocalypse wants a little bit more haste than Deathbringer does. And the reason for that is because haste increases the attack speed of these little riders that you summon, so you end up doing a little bit more damage with a little more haste than you would with Deathbringer. Deathbringer doesn't have any minions that it summons or anything like that, so you don't even worry about haste too much. You just grab a little bit of it. Now, we're also going to talk about two-handed versus one-handed, okay? So right now, Frost is doing better with two-handed, and this is going to get to be a bigger delta once you get your tier set, but right now, two-handed Frost is better. So if you have one hands and you're looting and running through your Mythic Zeros or whatever, make sure you go ahead and set your loot specialization to Unholy. Frost gives you a chance at one hand or two hand, and you want to make sure that you're not getting given one hands in your vault. So just a little bit of a tip. Now, for your Runeforge, you're going to want to apply Fallen Crusader. Fallen Crusader is going to go on your two-handed weapon, and you're going to be good to go. The only time this is going to change is if you decide you want to run Shattering Blade and Frostbane and Mythic Plus. You can get away with running one-handed weapons with Razor Ice on one of the weapons and Fallen Crusader on the other. So again, doesn't do as much damage, it's not as good, but I'm just giving you guys options. Alright guys, well thank you very much for watching, and if you have any questions, anything you feel like I missed, hopefully you guys know by now, I really try to respond to all the comments. Anything that you want me to make for the season that you're like, hey, I'd love a new add-on, a new player add-on video or anything like that, I'm happy to go through it for you guys. So I'll be making a guide for Unholy, I'll be making a guide for Blood and the new Kaiveza fight. So yeah, good luck with the season and suffer well.